our next session on the School of Solidarity, where we hold integrative and immersive conversations and dialogues. And also we feature transformative and regenerative practices around finance, economics, and also enterprises. And we also feature those individuals who have been on a journey of transformation and transforming their societies or communities. Today, for the first time, we're holding a panel session with such heavyweights that I'm a bit flustered, starting from Canada, no less, because my dear friend, and you've seen Mark Anielski on my channel many times. So Mark and I used to host a series on the A Tale of Two Economies, which was about exactly what we are going to discuss today, which is the Islamic impulse and the Catholic as well. Although Mark he's a champion of the economy of well-being and happiness. So let me just quickly introduce, starting with Mark Anielski, who is the president of Anielski Management Inc. He focuses on building economies of well-being and happiness. Mark has been working with Canada's First Nations, developing well-being-based sovereign wealth funds and the first well-being bank based on public banking models and interest-free loan origination, similar to Sweden's YAC Members Bank. Then we have Momin Said. Momin is a Canadian Islamic finance professional and advisory lead at Abrahamic Finance, and one of the prominent voices in Canada on the promotion of Islamic finance. And apart from this, Momin he has 20 years experience in Canadian real estate development. And he has an MBA from Queen's University Smith School of Business and BCom in accounting from the University of Alberta. And then the biggest star of the show, Mark, please don't get jealous. I'm saying, because this is the first time, Jibril, I've asked so many times. So I have my, brother, colleague, and my PhD colleague, actually, Jibril Adjejo, who is the CEO at SME Funds Capital Limited. And I think his biggest achievement is, issuance of the first ever corporate green sukuk in Africa, the 13th in the world, and first joint issuance of a bond and sukuk in a single issue. Anyway, so thank you guys for being here. So today's topic, I think we have very briefly touched upon that also keeping in line with my own work and my research. Today we are going to explore, is finance the religion, or can we attach religious values to finance? Especially, we have an Islamic finance expert, Momin, here. So we will ask Momin, first of all, that in a country like Canada, which of course is a secular country, it's a non-Islamic country, we're going to explore what is the need, or the what value can Islamic finance add to the landscape, because then we'll come to Mark, because Mark will, I know Mark will say, okay, so what's new in all this? Because apart from giving it a new language maybe, or terminology, what difference can Islamic finance bring to already the work Mark has been doing? So welcome, Momin. Let's start from you. So can you please touch upon what I've just elaborated here? Thank you.
For sure. Firstly and foremost, thank you so much for having me with the session and with these wonderful gentlemen who truly are juggernauts in their respective field. And I mean, in reference of Islamic finance or Islamic finance pertaining to Canada, first and foremost, I'll preface that having clean sources of rizq, which is sustenance, is something which is elaborated on extensively in the Quran, right? So having clean, ethical, proper sources of funds to satiate oneself is a very, very important aspect. In fact, the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would worry so much on how they are sourcing their funds to make sure that they're pure and clean from an Islamic perspective. So by default, that plays an important, very, very important role from a religious perspective. In reference of Islamic finance to Canada, again, I think having moral probity when it comes to finance, I don't think it's something that has to be separate or segregated. It can be something that is jointly done and can be very lucrative and profitable and beneficial as well. So when I deal with this aspect, because we are very a mercantile, capitalistic centric oriented existence right now, from my end, I always say that for Canada, the business proposition, the value proposition is that you're tapping into a $4 trillion USD plus market, right? So how do we benefit Canada by benefiting the Muslim community and other faith communities by providing alternative financing that is growing globally? So it's a business case. To be honest, it's a pretty simple business case from that perspective. And I feel that there is clear indication of its value within the Canadian market, within Alberta in specific, that is working on regulatory changes to allow halal financing to come in and for the benefit of the community at large.
Thank you, Momin. Welcome back, Jubril. You disappeared. So I don't know if you've heard my question and my introduction.
No, I missed the question, sorry.
Yeah, so because Momin is the only Islamic finance expert per se, I mean, you know about Islamic finance as well because you set up the first Sukuk bond, and you are working with a team, especially our colleague, Dr. Bashir Ashodi, and he's an Islamic finance expert as well. So in that light, now that you are not in Nigeria, you set up a green bond, a Sukuk in Nigeria. Now that you are in Canada, you have migrated. Do you find this landscape, is it desirable now for you to jump on the Islamic finance bandwagon? Because of course, Islamic finance in a country like Canada is still an alien concept. Mostly the Muslim immigrants are trying to set up something which I think should start from their community level. But how do you see this? Thank you.
I mean, first of all, all my business is still in Nigeria. I'm still in Nigeria. That's why I'm here. Working closely with the government on setting up the climate change fund for the country, $10 billion. And in that fund, I'm actually bringing in Islamic finance instruments as part of that fund, not just conventional, because the idea of that fund is to be able to blend or co-finance with various players in the market. And we have to start recognizing that Islamic investors are also part of the ecosystem. It's not a special ecosystem segment; it's part of the system, right? So that's the narrative that I've been pushing here over the past for a year now on this fund. But as far as Canada, I've not really heard anything about. I mean, only by hearing Momin and also Fahad talk about Islamic finance. I really haven't heard it before. So on that basis, what I would even like to understand is if there currently a regulatory framework, for Islamic finance in Canada. I mean, that's the foundational start point. So if there is one, you can now start to build on that foundation. So if there is one, I feel Islamic finance is a very interesting concept that I feel that if the entire banking financing ecosystem understands it, it will really reduce a lot of non-performing loans on the balance sheet. It will really make financial institutions see themselves as not just financiers, but also working partner in the progress of the businesses. Right, that is what that is the philosophy for me of Islamic finance, and that even currently, I'm also trying to set up a structure that could enable commercial banks, the non-Islamic finance banks, to see how they can start to partner with Islamic banks to aggregate some of their assets that they have financed, but they're having challenges with them. Because what we have, for example, in Nigeria is that we have some transactions that have done okay, but because of the economic crisis that we are aware of, a lot of banks are just putting those customers under pressure. And if you change the fundamental of those transactions, you realize that the customer did not steal money or diverted money. It's just the microeconomic factors affecting those businesses. So I'm challenging the banking system. We have what we call a Muhabaha model. Why can't we work a Muhabaha model that will aggregate all these stranded assets into a lease structure, and then look for more transactions where we can lease this asset to? And that way you prevent a customer from having a bad credit because the business could not pay back because of economic crisis. That kind of innovative model is very important. And it also deals with the spirit of finance as well, because you can only think about preventing a customer from having a bad credit if you have that spirit to really help. Right. And I feel that's really what, for me, that's the level where I have taken finance to now. And that's the spiritual part of it. And I believe it's only Islamic finance I've really seen conducting finance with the spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Jibril. I think now we can bring Mark in, because what you've said is focusing, it's kind of accentuating on the ethics or, the spiritual aspect of finance. But again, as you haven't even heard about Islamic finance in Canada, it is a very new concept. It's within the Islamic or Muslim communities. And I think it was brought in, Muevmnt said it is just for business purposes, but I think it was to cater to communities' needs. So now bringing in Mark, especially Mark has been working on this forever, for all his life. And he's, the non-interest banking. And he already has a model, and, he's presented that model to the Canadian government as well. So Mark, tell us, can we now integrate, the philosophy or the spirit of Islamic finance to what you have also been trying to do? But before you come in, just one thing. I know when you put Islamic before finance or any religious, entitlement, it kind of, freaks out, especially the establishment, because, it's a secular country or it's a Christian country. How do we bring these together, these two impulses together? Thanks.
Well, I'm going to come at it from a Abrahamic faith position, and I can go to Leviticus, and Moses got the commandments on the mountain before Prophet Muhammad, before Jesus, and God says, "You shall not charge interest to your brothers." And yet somehow, I don't believe it for a minute, they allowed Gentiles, but the Gentiles can commit sin by charging interest. No, I don't believe that. God was universally loving to all of us. So just from that initial teaching that Moses carries, and then we see, so why was usury forbidden? Aristotle said usury was a sin. Thomas Aquinas, 13th century greatest Catholic theologian, upholds Aristotle, and it's clear in his Summa Theologica that usury is a sin. The Catholic Church said usury was a sin until about 1840, when the popes deferred to his economic advisors on the open question whether it was now acceptable that charging interest on loans was acceptable as a basis of managing risk. And I'm a staunch position that no, that this was unacceptable from the time of Moses, and it's still unacceptable. And not only that, it's unnecessary, because we, as an economist, I've shown the burden of embedded interest in our economies that is strangling all of us and literally destroying the environment, as well as we simply rationalize the acceptance of loan origination through interest bearing units. And I've shown that it's possible to originate loans based on real wealth and without the need to charge interest. I mean, you can recover your operating costs for a loan fee, the way Yacht Bank in Sweden, which was, blessed by the Imam of Sweden. It's like, why? Because engineers figured out a system in which you didn't have to charge interest on loans. And so it's really just a matter of, does anyone have the courage across Abrahamic faiths, or even if you're not of the Abrahamic faith, to sort of build a system that is, as Aquinas said, usury is an injustice. It's an injustice against us. It's basically ignoring the teachings that the Creator, that God gave us, and we have a responsibility. So if we want to create a slave and maintain a slave system and be ignorant of those past teachings and the wisdom, then it's on our watch.
But that's looking at the ethics or ethical side of it. If we look at the operational side of it, how do we bring these two impulses together? Because there is a lot of resistance, and to be very honest, I know that from an Islamic finance perspective, people just find it so difficult, and operationally maybe it hasn't succeeded even in Muslim countries. So now we are proposing in a secular country where faith is kind of disappearing from everywhere. So now we are saying, oh no, but it's a faith-based ethical model. Do you think, my question to all of you is, do you think that where and especially in a world where finance is the religion, do we still need religion to, instill these values and, faith and ethics into finance? Any one of you can come in.
Well, I'll
for
start.
me, right? Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead,
Mike.
Jabril. Go ahead, Jabril.
No, I was gonna say, it goes back to this thing we all say, and Mark also says is that well-being, is that spirit of caring, right? We all say these things. People just think we're just speaking theory or some fantasy land. But one thing that has been so true right now, with this polarized society we're living in, right? I think a lot of us just have to ensure that in every solution we propose, it comes from that spiritual and caring and loving standpoint. Right. So even in my company, my investment transaction, I always go back to that argument that if we don't do this, then you'll be unfairly treating the customer this way. Right. And it just has to be part of our argument all the time, and we cannot give up, because right now we need a lot of people like ourselves to continue to speak. Right. And hopefully people will listen. Some people will listen and understand it and then drive it across their own institution. That's just what I would recommend and say. Thank you.
Mark, and then maybe Muevmnt. Mark,
I agree with Jabril. I mean, it's not like we have alternatives, right? So when at our function the other day, Muevmnt, what I came away with is, it's not like we don't have alternative systems. We've actually modeled. I've modeled in spreadsheets these interest-free platforms. So then the question is, well, why don't we do it? Why don't we act upon the opportunities? And part of it is we're scared, we're uneducated, people around us are afraid of finance. They don't understand banking. And even if we go to the mosque or the church and I say, hey, let's all pool some of our extra $1,000 and start doing microloans to each other. And then this question, well, under what conditions do we trust each other? And so what I see is trust is being shattered. We have a monopoly of money creators. call banks. They're just corporations. So, again, I'm not saying I'm frustrated. It's just maybe it's just our human nature condition. And so we have to, as Jabril says, we have to persist and keep these ideas out there, try to experiment, try to pilot them. That's why I like working with First Nations. I can work with a small group of people. But they don't, when you present something to them, you say, aren't you tired of getting abused by RBC and all the big fees they charge you? And like, yeah, you're frustrated, but to literally take the next step on Monday and go, let's start this new bank. It's a challenge.
Moment.
Yeah, I mean, really good, insightful answers, to the question. The reality, one thing is that, I mean, Anika Bajay, I will correct that it hasn't failed in Muslim countries. And in fact, many Muslim countries, it's prospering. The failure comes if there is not enough governmental or legislative reform to assist its growth, right? So Malaysia, for me, because I lived there when I studied my Islamic banking and finance education, is that they had a central bank, and Dr. Zeti Akhtar, who was a female governor of the central bank, which very often you don't see in Western countries at all, but you see in the Muslim country. They implemented basically having a dual system, right? An Islamic system and conventional, to try to bring the Islamic at par with conventional. So these are things that are important to do. I think ultimately, when people think about interest-free banking, they may think of social welfareism, or I don't know what comes into their mind. But what people don't recognize is that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, out of the 9 that were in his life granted paradise, all of them were successful businessmen. So there is a clear indication that being fair does not mean that you cannot be successful from a mercantile, from a business or economic standpoint. That is not the case. The Prophet didn't say everyone is now equal from a communist perspective and this and that. There's no, nothing, no. But what was pointed out is that there needs to be fair, ethical aspects of dealing with finance. And before I conclude, I mean, we know that the final farewell speech, pilgrimage sermon that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave, in it, usury was talked about openly, right? That he has now completely abolished interest, and he will start with his own family member, his own uncle, that anyone who owes them money, that interest is abolished. So, the importance of that has been present from an Islamic perspective. And the last item is that, look, at the end of the day, with society losing faith in general, especially in the West, I can't say the same thing in the East, and including Christian countries that are in the East, Romania, et cetera, et cetera. You see a lot of countries in the East that are very practicing. So when we're seeing people losing faith, I think it's more predominantly in the West, and not South America, just West, as in just North America and Great Britain and so on and so forth. So I feel that for them to understand this concept, we can, of course, always adjust the wording to, instead of faith-based, we can call it ethical finance or SRI finance, whatever the case may be, so long as the underpinning is based off of Sharia compliance that permits us to do these products, and as Mark has shown, can happen, right? And Jibril have shown as well. So sorry for the long-winded answers, but I kind of wanted to weave through the various themes.
No, thank you. It was, I think, very insightful contribution coming from you. So I think also I'm going to ask you then, your company or your platform is called, you named it Abrahamic Finance, right? So what have you done about it? As in, have you approached, I mean, I was the one who put you in touch with Mark, and I'm sort of putting all of you in touch and saying, you need to gather forces together, because all of you are kind of saying the same thing. But to achieve, on a macro level, I don't know if we can do that. It's a challenge for all of us. Mark has been doing it for some time. Can we then, all of you, pool together and put your forces together? Then I want us to maybe think about how can we practically achieve something now together, right? That was the purpose of bringing all of you together. And Fahad is not present today because he's built, a digitized tokenization solution, which I also referred to Mark. And Mark's question was, but what's new in this? And I thought, okay, maybe we need to have these dialogues and see if we can develop something together, which is going to help all of us. So, Abrahamic finance, what did you have in mind when you chose this name?
So, when I was thinking of names, and the name popped up actually while I was studying in Malaysia. This is now, 13 years ago. And I was thinking, when I come back, how can I bring a theme, or at least discuss a theme that has commonalities, right? And Mark, I actually have a great respect for the Catholic saint Thomas Aquinas. He's done some amazing things. And he's also indebted to Imam al-Ghazali, rahmatullah alayhi, as well, from Imam al-Ghazali's work. And you can see when people are very spiritually oriented, they can do some amazing things. So the intention is, and what I want to, so with the advisory, what we do is we provide Sharia compliant advisory, right? Someone says, okay, look, we have this product. How can we structure in a Sharia compliant manner? So myself and who I work with, which is my ustad, my teacher, Dr. Hassan Lasasna out of Malaysia. He is the global chair of Standard Chartered Banks Sharia Compliant Division. So he's the chair of Sharia Advisory. So we sit down, then we provide people advisory on, okay, how do you structure it, what you can do. Interesting thing is that a lot of the clients we're getting are fintech or tech offering, like what Fahad is doing and many type of things like that. Not exactly what Fahad is doing, but in different realms. So I do feel like when we have wonderful people like Mark with Jibril, and I have to give a shout out to Fahad. I mean, brother Fahad is an unsung hero, a very down-to-earth person, but has done amazing, amazing things. And his contribution to this conversation would add to the color of it 100%. But I feel ultimately the goal is exactly how you said, to connect with various people from within faith, outside of faith, and how do you harmonize it, right? How do you push on it? What can you do to make things happen and to make the government understand? And again, because I'm in business, I'm always looking at it from a business perspective, the language that the government understands. So at the end, the byproduct is ethical, Islamic, and this and that. But I'm looking at, okay, how do I speak a language that they will understand? And ultimately, then we say, okay, by you providing a product that Mark is doing, and by default, what Islamic finance does, what does it do, right? If Alberta does it, number one, it signals to the world that Alberta is ready to provide infrastructure for faith-based financing. What does that result in? That will result in foreign direct investment, number one. Number two, what does that result in? Family offices that are ethically oriented, or Islamic VCs, or Islamic funds, or Islamic REITs, then they will consider Alberta as their regional office in North America, or at least in Canada, because of this initiative that only Alberta, out of all the provinces in Canada, and out of all major jurisdiction in North America, has actually made a promise to do. So then lastly is that infrastructure, right? We can use sukuk, as we know, for infrastructure development, for government funding aspects, for funding various items. So the point is that how do we make them understand the benefit so that it also benefits us? I feel that's how we have to present it ultimately.
Can I just say something? I feel personally, and the work I've done, especially in the UK as well, I feel this is the fault line with Islamic finance, especially in a country like Canada or the UK, that when we start off from the government level, right, and you start off with business in mind and finance, yes, fair enough, but the community aspect is missing. And I've been saying it for about 13, 14 years. Unless we set good examples within Muslim communities, right? like the work that Fahad is doing or wants to do starts from the community level, because it's about community pooling in their funds and, then the shared musharaka or shared partnership. If we can't start from there, so if we are Muslims are not setting those examples within our own community, we have to show, like, look, this is how it works. Then I don't know how the government can be enticed into something. This is how I feel. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong. But I have been saying, and Mark has pointed out, like, I've been trying to do that for 14 years, right? And a model like Ahuat, giving interest-free loans, not interest-free, benevolent loans, right? From on a micro level within the community, but there is no trust. If there is no trust, we cannot we cannot showcase, we can't show, like, look, this is how it is working in this community from a micro to macro. This is how I feel. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, because you and Jubril have been working on a macro level, especially with the governments, and he's set up a sukuk, and you are a businessman. Am I right in this, thinking like this?
I mean, I think, and I'll let the other handsome gents jump in, but I think it's two-pronged. It has to be from a governmental standpoint and from a community standpoint. Even what Fahad is doing right now. So, I mean, one of my clients actually is probably the world's first who is providing leased vehicle asset tokenization, Shariah compliant setup based out of Vancouver. What Fahad is doing real estate asset right now, tokenization. Ultimately, though, in order for that to move forward, you still need to go through the government regulatory frameworks, have exempt market dealers, et cetera, involved, right? So ultimately, you do need to have a macro aspect moving forward, and then a micro. And Anika Baj, as we know, we have examples in India and Pakistan where there's committees, right? Microfinance, people throw in monthly amount based strictly on trust, and then those interest-free or benevolent loans that how the committee works utilizes. So we have existing examples of that. And there are stuff from communities, efforts from communities taking place. There's smaller efforts. But what I feel is that the efforts become desegregated. I think at times by having a framework that allows things to move a little bit more freely, or a government endorsed to allow, not government endorsing the product, but for facilitating the growth of this industry, then it allows more harmonization and minds coming together and so on and so forth. But you're not wrong. It has to be from both aspects. It completely does. Because Islamic finance, a lot of the times, is missing the point of being commerce-centric. And as you said, the microfinance perspective is missing. And that was one of the items when I was at the IFE conference in Bahrain just in December. That was one of the topics of Islamic microfinance. How do we grow this? So now open up to Mark. Sorry, I took a lot.
Final words from Mark, maybe?
I'm going to build on what Momin is saying. Like, so here in Alberta, where you and I live, Momin, we have an opportunity. I'm a big fan of the biggest public bank in North America, the Alberta Treasury Branch. It could effectively create loans without interest, without charging interest, because it's 100% back. So we already have an instrument. Now imagine if we could get the finance minister, the premier, in a discussion saying, Alberta's advantage is this public bank, and it actually aligns with the Christian, the Muslim communities and their teachings. I could get the Archbishop of Edmonton, if I get his attention, it's like, look, this is our responsibility. We have assets galore on the balance sheet of the Archdiocese, and we're not helping the poor in the way we could be. And this would make Alberta like the most, sought after place to live in North America. And there's nothing stopping us from, we already have that primary instrument called the Alberta Treasury Branch. And the Ontario NDP finance advisor called me. He's a Muslim. He said, can you help kind of conceive creating the first public bank in Ontario? And I said, absolutely. Now, yes, there will be barriers, but the legal work, all of that stuff, that's just, so it's really like, that would be my challenge to us living here in this province, saying we could do this, but how are we going to, I will say, as a business person, show me the contract and I'll start working with Momen this week. Like, give us a contract.
Yeah.
And Jabril, come back.
Yeah. So thank you, Mark. I think final words from Jabril. Just final thoughts, and we'll continue another session. So I was asking, should we start from the community level, the micro, and considering your thesis was oh my God, I can't even.
Community entrepreneurship. It's been a long time.
Yes,
actually.
that was your thesis for PhD, and you actually were awarded by Da Vinci Institute for your model. So I think now is the time you champion that in Alberta or Canada. What do you say, micro or macro?
I think from the top, and I tell you why from the top, because and I can only speak because I work closely in Nigeria and Africa, and I work closely with very top government officials at the minister level, sometimes presidency level, and this is where I push this narrative, even at the bank level, at the senior executive level, the CEOs. One thing I've been saying to everybody now is there's lack of innovation in the banking and finance system, right? And the majority of the capital is still within the non-interest Islamic ecosystem. And the lack of innovation, the lack of boldness, by the bankers themselves. They see a transaction through one lens. And once that lens is having challenges, they go all out to make a big mess. And they don't look at other perspectives and other body of knowledge, which is Islamic finance and other philosophy of finance, to find a way to provide lasting solutions to all these challenges. And one thing I also tell them is this: nobody could believe that geopolitics, war, pandemic, and many other issues that is really dislocating the entire ecosystem and global economy will be something that we are living with every single day. So I'm asking the bankers, the senior executives, that how do we start to develop new instruments, leveraging on all kinds of instruments to respond to all these various challenges, messing around all the things we learned in school and in business school. And so that we don't make the subject and the object the problem. But we find a way to address it, because at the end of the day, what we want is people should have jobs, families should be happy, people should be happy. If we don't have all these things, this spirit will not work effectively in a very loving manner. So that is a deep conversations I'm still having with them as we speak today. I'm having a meeting with the CEOs on Friday in Nigeria, and the same thing I'm still going to push across and say, guys, I know it's not easy, but we will literally have to start to think this way. Otherwise, because we all live based on capital. If we don't do this capital well with a good spirit,
Mark's well-being economy comes in. That is what
absolutely, that's well-being. Absolutely.
Jabril for president of Nigeria.
And the final part, reason why I said from the top, no. You never know, actually. You never know what's going to happen.
And then Mark is the finance minister, right?
I'll be your finance minister.
But my final point is what Momin said about some countries have successfully implemented Islamic finance. The countries that are struggling is because of that political will, to make it work. That's what I'm saying from the top. No matter what we do at the micro, yes, we can make some impact, but the level and the magnitude of global crisis, we have to take it from the top. That's what I believe in right now. And we have to just try that. We have to try.
Yeah, but things get messed up at the top, It has to start, from the grounds up.
I know. Ground up take time now. I know, but ground up is taking time. I'm young, but I'm not getting younger too, right? I tell you, and ground up is taking time. It's taking time. We have to take from the top. From my own perspective, for Africa.
I think we should keep it for another session and continue these discussions, and also have Fahad in here So Fahad has the solution for the community's needs. So that's why I'm sort of propagating that. But thank you so much for your time. This was a wonderful discussion. I think we should all just continue this. And, you know, this space I've created is for these dialogues, and how can we further our, otherwise every person, every single person, including me, has my own model, and everybody's talking about, but this is my model and this is my model. I'm saying, no, it's not working. We need to now, you know, converge all of these and see whose
100%.
strength, whoever has the strength. I mean, my strength, maybe I call myself a stewardess, because I can bring everybody together and say,
Bring it
okay, let's
together.
discuss. So
100%.
thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Inshallah,
Thank
we'll
you so
speak
much.
again.
Thank you for having
Thank you,
me.
everyone.